Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent positional game to share with you. This was played just today, March 25th, round 10 of the 2025 European Chess Championship. On the white end, Yağız, Kaan, Erdogmuş, playing against Jorden Van Foreest. All right, on board, we're going to be looking at here a Philidor Defense. After these two moves are included, Philidor Defense Lion variation. Now, this is an opportunity here for white to chop on e5 and then exchange queens. Black will go uncastled. Oh, simple development instead. The queenless position, balanced results. Lee Chess Masters database, it's hovering around 25% win for white, 25 for black, 50% draw. Queens stay on in this game, and this tension remains for quite a bit. So let's get some development in here. Bishop out for each, castles for each, some space for white on the queen side, covering some squares here with c6. Some new options emerge for the queen as well. Flight squares for each side. This one for white, a bit more purposeful. Purposeful in that the bishop can now safely play to e3. It is stable. Rook e8, rook e1. And from here, black now wants to kind of unravel a bit this queenside. Wants to maneuver the knight to f8, but doing so straight away would give up this big pawn. So only at this point does black go ahead and release this tension. If ever along the way white was capturing here on e5, that would only be a help to black. What would be happening? We'd be exchanging this 4th rank white pawn for black's 3rd rank pawn, and squares open up for the minor pieces. The knight has an excellent jump. Bishop maybe could go to b4 or c5. So in order to play this move, we have to do something about this first. It's the capture here on d4. I also wondered a bit about queen c7. Queen c7 adds some security to this. Maybe then you could look forward to this move. A new option may be available to white with a queen here on c7, and the structure here can change. So for instance, d5, maybe after this capture, the bishop is there to recapture. Queen is maybe a bit more vulnerable on c7 with this structural shift. Knight takes bishop, knight takes with tempo, for instance. So rather than allow this possibility, this is the moment. These pawns here are now exchanged. No queen c7 in this position. We get the chop on d4, and how to recapture? Well, it's with the bishop. The bishop is not vulnerable to a knight, so it's really well positioned here in the center. There's no knight c6 move bothering the bishop. There is a pawn move that could bother the bishop, but that would be a very serious error to weaken that d5 square, create a big hole in black's camp. This move, we might also say, anticipates some pressure on e4. The rook is there now, defending e4 directly after maybe the bishop gets out of the way one day. Pressure on that point. All right, after this recapture on d4, we get the maneuver with the knight. The knight doesn't have these jumps anymore. The queen feels comfortable now on this square d3. Nice and cozy. Rooks are connected. Following up, we have bishop e6 and knight to d2. Similar to how there was tension between d4 pawn and e5 pawn, we now have this tension between the bishops, and neither side is too quick to initiate the capture because that would help improve a knight. d2 knight would be improved. f8 knight would be improved on the recapture. From here, queen c7. Healthy development for each side. The big difference here is related to the center. E4 pawn, E4 versus D6 battle. All right, from here we have Queen G3. And Black's follow-up, very sensible looking, activates that last piece. Computer has its eye on the following. Wants to challenge this queen. Wants to play knight h5. There's a big difference here, I should note, between the queens. Much more active white queen. Wants to play knight h5. It's looking at some kind of a repetition, knight jumping to these two, queen to these two. All right, this queen post not challenged. We have rook a to d8. This pawn here is poison. Bishop takes pawn, there's b6, and the bishop will be 1. However, after a5, an invasive pawn now, established in Black's camp, this is now a threat. There is a parking spot on b6 to follow. Now, Black's approach here is queen to b8. Now, how the computer wants to play it, it says, do something about this pawn right now. It says go ahead and play b5. And be okay, in other words, giving up this file. You have at least removed that invasive pawn. We're going to see how this invasive pawn here on a5 ends up creating some weaknesses in Black's camp. Now, Black's approach here, he plays queen to b8. Now, let me throw this position to as a pop quiz. What move would you play here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, the top move in the engine's eyes was not played here, but I really do like the move that was played in the game. That move, queen to e3, we see this pressure, battery formed towards a7, somewhat white is somewhat coordinating with that a5 pawn and forming that battery. This will provoke a weakness in Black's camp one way or another. The top move here, the computer points out a really sharp move. Give yourself a pat on the back if you found this one. Top move here is knight d5. Now, what's going on with this? Well, let's see. The main question to ask with this move, what's happening if pawn takes knight? Well, let's see. The pawn recaptures. The rook would spring to life. If bishop takes pawn, we take with the bishop. And you can't take back because of this direct, indirect coordination there on g7. You'd be getting mated. What's happening? If bishop f5 in this position, well, here would be that follow-up move. Sharp move, rook takes bishop, with the idea to next swipe that knight. This is crushing. There's also a mate threat. In the end, we'd be looking at a position here where white is up a healthy pawn. It's calling this about +2. Okay, this knight d5 move was not played. Sharp, for sure. Battery formed instead. Now, big question. How are you addressing this threat on a7? Black ended up playing c5 here. Now, again, one way or another, there's going to be a weakness in Black's camp. If you play a6, big dark square weakness on b6. Bishop can start poking around, hit the queen, target the rook. Black's approach is with c5. Now, he knows what he is signing up for and playing in this way. There is a big weakness now on d5, and white will operate really well on this weakness from here on out. So first things first, we have to go ahead and exchange bishop for knight. Not the worst exchange of minor pieces, that's for sure. That was a key defender of that weakened d5 square, and white is able to hop right to it. Now, black swipes a pawn, but I could assure you Black does not feel as if he is up a pawn. The extra pawn Black has is this B pawn, and that B pawn is a big target. Black will have to continually babysit this B pawn. There's going to be pressure soon on this point. Rook B3, Rook E B1 right around the corner. Black's play here is with Rook D7, anticipating the pressure on B7. The computer has its eye on Knight D7, and then after the doubling, it wants to play B6. All right, there isn't a great shift or a great difference between these two moves. Rook D7 played in this game. Follow up, Queen to D3. Now, I want to point out, this is an important moment here. You might think that after this rook plays here, that Black maybe missed something, that there's a skewer here. That would be a losing move, bishop here to B5. Let's see why. If White played bishop to B5 here, Black would have the following. Now, initially, I was thinking, oh, you chop here, and if White takes back, okay, there's a trick, a check, and the queen falls. No. The top move here would be bishop to D4, hitting the queen, and now there's a serious problem on this file. There's a big pin on that e-pawn. Where do you go with the queen? If you play here, there's bishop takes knight. You can't take back. You can't take back here. Drop the queen. And if you go somewhere else with the queen, let's say D3, this rook is hanging, or it's unprotected. There's still a pin here on the e-file. So going for this skewer would be a losing move by White. Queen D3, however, now paves the way for this move. Now, at this stage, Jorden plays queen to D8, and he knows that this is going to hit. He's prepared to play an imbalance here, minor piece and two pawns versus the rook. Now, the top move in the computer's eyes, it's saying rook E to D8. I don't know that you're going to find many humans playing this move. This just looks way too passive. It's not as if you're getting some D5 break-in, and this D file is going to spring open. White has a firm grip over that D5 square. Not a very human move to play. Jordan's approach, we might say, a bit more active. He has an eye here with queen D8 on that A5 pawn. So let's see how this plays out. We get the skewer. Queen takes pawn. You don't have to take right away. This situation here is not going away for Black. Double the rooks. Bishop takes knight, recapturing with a queen. This square remains open for pieces. So right now it's the queen occupying that square. Eventually the knight will maneuver there. Queen A2, knight C4, and from here some defense over the 7th rank. If something else was played here, so for instance, this may be an opportunity, you might think, to swipe that C2 pawn. How's that playing out? Let's see. Queen takes C2. This is how the game could continue. Now you swipe the rook, and then you could go ahead and take on B7. And the point here is that a move like knight F6, we don't have to worry about trying to find a square for our queen to defend the knight. We would have a mate in 2. Chop, and then checkmate on G7. So how Black plays it, rather than grabbing this pawn, some 7th rank in defense. Now comes queen to D1. That's a top move. Defending C2, and now what's nearby, rather than simply collecting this rook, he has his eye on a bigger prize, that prize being the queen. She has no squares. This is the only safe square. And right around the corner, there's rook A3. She's trapped. So how do you handle this? Look at the Beautiful minor piece coordination there on the A file. All squares covered. This is the threat, not this one. Bishop has that one covered. The play here is with A6. And at this point, we see bishop captures rook. Now, why not go in for the queen? If rook A3 here, we would have queen takes rook, pawn takes bishop, and in the end, it's calling this about plus 0.6, not a decisive evaluation. All right, that imbalance, by the way, what would we be looking at here? A bishop, rook, and pawn versus a queen. All right, how it plays out in this one does not go hunting for the queen. Meets this A6 move with bishop captures, rook, rook takes, and now the knight maneuvers to D5. We have a little repetition here, knight B6, and then he finally decides here on G6, producing a more stable square here for the king. Stable flight square, G2. Follow up, knight E6. Knight returns to D5, once more bothering that rook. Rook to D7. Follow up now, C3. Just robbing the last good square here for Team Black. That square being D4. This knight, it's easy to be fixated on just all of these forward moves. Well, it has a nice defensive role as well. Guards C3, and C3 guards D4. These minors don't have a jump in that D4 square anymore. So the rook is there as well, but this is a nice, convenient defender. And also, now that C3 is in, nearby there is rook A1, trapping the queen. So a wonderful, it's a simple pawn move, nice multi-purpose move. Take away a square, set up a queen trap. What more can you ask of a pawn move? Follow up from here, knight G5. What other option is there? This stops the idea of a queen trap. If some other move, we'll see why shortly. If some other move is played, for instance, let's say the queen tries to escape through this A4 or A5 square. Let's touch on each briefly. If queen A4 was played rather than the move in the game, knight G5, there'd be a fork. That pesky knight jumps into B6. And if queen A5, well, simple enough. How about you go ahead and finally collect that big pawn, a 2-point pawn. We have weaknesses here and very active white rook in the end. So it might look something like this. Maybe this pawn is grabbed, checks, queen F3, white goes hunting for the king. F5, F7 is weakened. So that's not a wonderful continuation for black. Let's see the try in the game here after that. C3 move, it's knight G5. And follow up from here is rook 3 to B2. Some second rank defense. Now, what's the issue? If you go in for this queen trap, well, you would be losing now as white because there's knight takes H3 check. Queen takes F2 check. And if you take the knight here, even if you don't take the knight, you'd still be losing. But yeah, this would be checkmate. One sample line. So some care, in short, must be taken over the second rank, and it is. Rook 3 to B2. Queen C4, and now F4. White's winning material. More material. Let's see how this plays out. This is a nice continuation here. Knight takes E4 follows. Pawn takes bishop. Pawn takes pawn. We're not done with this continuation just yet. Only winning move is knight E7 check. Now you might think knight F6. Not quite. The knight is there to recapture and defend the rook. Knight E7. What's the story here? We're ready to win the rook. Rook takes knight follows. We're not done yet. Queen D8 check. And this is the way to finally track down that rook. In the end, what are we looking at here material-wise? Interesting imbalance, to be sure. We're looking at a knight and 5 pawns versus 2 rooks. This is decisive for white. In fact, there's only one more move here in the game. Rook b3 and black resigns. The key point here to cover, rook has g3 covered, and what are you supposed to do if the game continued? There's no perpetual checks. Your options here, if you want to try and keep the queens on, these are the 3 moves to look at. But 2 of them, these 2 here, could both be met with, for instance, queen d3, and the queens come off. Now, how would this look if the game did continue from this point? Eventually what's going to happen, these 3 queenside pawns will all fall, and eventually we'll be looking at a kingside specific game, pretty much, where white has available this idea to eventually go for an exchange sacrifice, if necessary, and then play a rook versus 3 pawns position. And it's not as if black's 3 pawns are far advanced and pose any serious danger to white. White will be able to convert that. The other try, if you, let's say in this position, if the game continued with queen to a5, that's not going to end well. You could give the knight a kick, track down the f pawn, you're on the knight, there's checks, the b pawn is ready to fall. If you're bringing the queen over here like this, she's just out of play. So that's not going to end well for black either. So how this one plays out, we just have a resigner here after rook to b3, a very nice positional game here out of this Philidor Defense lion variation. Started out positional and then nice tactical sequence in the end there. Anyhow, what are your thoughts on this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.